Today I'm sharing a watercolor palette with you that I'm pretty sure you've never heard of. So first, the story of how I came to this brand of paint. Imagine me, my husband, on a road trip through Tuscany. Yeah, bliss. Except I was struggling hard to capture the iconic Tuscan landscape. But I finally did one morning while painting from the window of our ridiculously cute Airbnb. That's it right there. While packing the car before heading to Florence, I leave my one good painting, guess where? On top of the flipping car. And yeah, we drive away, and who knows, I'm hoping that someone is enjoying that painting to this day. So I'm panicked because girl is out of watercolor paper in Italy. Not happening. So Google tells me there's this centuries-old art store just down the street from our new Airbnb in Florence. My hubs wanted to linger and rest and check out the new place with this view. And I was like, Duomo don't care, get me to the art store. So I got my paper, walked around the store, and loved the experience. But oddly enough, it wasn't until I returned home from Italy that I realized the significance of where I had been. And so I bought the Toscana palette. Yes, and I'm still cringing at the fact that I had to pay shipping for it because I bought it after I came home. When I first used this palette years ago, I did swatch it, but honestly, it was a very quick experience, and all I remember is thinking, this palette probably isn't for me. It's okay, but whatever. And I set it aside. My first impression after swatching was that it just didn't have that Christie-style flower painting palette vibe that I love so much. But as I continue swatching this time around, and I'm really paying attention, slowing down, I'm thinking I may have misjudged. But before we get more into that, friends, I want to give you my first tip with swatching. And if you've been around here for a minute, you know that swatching isn't something that comes naturally to me. I've had to kind of require myself to start swatching, but it's important. So number one, please, for the love, swatch on cold press watercolor paper. I am actually swatching on hot press today, and I loathe it. The thing about swatching is you want to use a lot of water, you want to see how those explosions happen, and you're not going to be able to get that full effect on hot press. Just trust me. Hot press isn't designed for big, bold, juicy washes of color. So I'm definitely feeling the struggle here. Okay, so back to me completely misjudging this palette. I'm noticing as I'm swatching, the colors aren't just earthy. And honestly, I don't know how I could have missed that when I first painted with it. Maybe I started with the earthy colors and got bored, and I don't know, maybe my ADHD is showing, but these blues and magentas and all that kind of stuff that's going on in the middle of this palette are like wow factor. So a second tip, and this is more just about supplies in general, not just swatching, but if a palette at first doesn't impress you, don't give up on it. Go back to it. There's so many reasons that you may not vibe with a palette, and it literally could just be that you're distracted that day. Now, I'm going to be painting with this palette today. And friends, I am so pumped for it because I've never created a full composition with this palette, I'm ashamed to say. And that's where my third tip comes in. Honestly, swatching just isn't enough. It is never enough. And I will go to bat on this point. It is never enough to get to know your palette just by swatching it. If you disagree with me, head into comments and let me know why, because this could be a really good conversation. And while you're at it, even if you do disagree with me, I think maybe we might be able to agree that this channel is fun and that I entertain you from time to time. So if that's the case, go ahead and give this video a boop. That's a like, friends, and it really helps out my channel. Okay, so back to tip number 3. I want you to swatch. But very soon after, at least within 24 hours, I highly suggest you carve out time to actually create a painting with the same palette. And you are going to learn so much more than if you had just stopped at swatching. Okay, the painting is coming soon. I know I keep saying that, but I want to share something with you that I haven't shared on this channel yet. And at the time of recording, I have recently launched a Patreon. And you're like, girl, what in the heck is Patreon? It's basically a membership. It's a place for you to dive deeper. Just like I want you to dive deeper with your new palettes and not give up on your palettes, I want you to dive deeper on your art journey and not give up on yourself. And Patreon is a great place to do that. It's really an extension of what we do here on YouTube. Let me show you a little bit about it. And then I promise, like so soon, I'm going to be painting with these crazy, gorgeous colors. Patreon allows me to deep dive with you. And here's how it works. Pieces of Joy, it's $1.50 a month. And really, this one is just for those who want to support me. Joy Chaser, $3 a month. You get VIP access to all the discounts. You get a watercoloring page printable that usually ties back to a YouTube video, so you don't have to worry about sketching. Joy Maker, an exclusive video once a month. So that means a straightforward how-to, no fuss, no muss, no music, just me teaching you. I feel like I'm always uploading something. Here's a peek at what the feed looks like for members, depending on what tier. So much going on all the time. And I'm always surprising members too with new benefits. So today I'm painting on this line art that I created years ago, and I did an editorial at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. And it's a rhododendron, which is the state flower of West Virginia. And if you'd like to follow along exactly with me and paint this piece with me, you could become a member at the Joy Chaser level in my new Patreon membership. All the information you need is below. So let's get to this painting though. The colors, I have to say, are incredibly rich, saturated, but velvety isn't exactly the word I would use. I often use that word to describe colors that are very rich and creamy, and these aren't quite creamy, but they're just so intense. And I'll tell you what, I definitely underestimated a few of these paints early on. The Scarlet Lake, oh good heavens to Betsy. Now, typically lake pigments are dye-based, so I'm gonna let y'all that are more experienced with all the pigment science have a conversation about that below, because that does potentially affect their light fastness, but I'm in love. Also, Geranium Lake was a go-to as I was painting these flower petals in the middle here. Purple Lake also, obviously, I'm a fan of the lakes. And you know what? Another favorite that I used again and again and again was the Naples Yellow Reddish. And at this point in the painting, I've used all of those plus a few more. Now I'm getting into the greens. Now I'm just gonna like sit back, shut my mouth, and let you enjoy a few moments of this painting unfolding. And I will tell you, I did switch to cold press because I know some of you were probably wondering. And it honestly lost its intensity a little bit more than I expected. But we're dealing with some historic pigments here, I believe. Again, this isn't my, expert realm, but it wouldn't be terribly surprising that some of these pigments would kind of soften up a bit after, they dry. So anywho, I'm still loving them. I'm still loving the lakes. I'm still digging the purples. And those yellows are just so luminous. Some of the yellows I used in those leaves in combination, of course, with Naples Yellow Reddish, which is more of a peach, honestly. I was into the Naples Yellow Light, the Cad Yellow Light. Those two I was going to again and again to kind of get that glowy vibe. And then another one that you probably wouldn't expect that I used a ton in those glowy leaves was the Gold Green. I adore that one. And surprisingly, the yellow ochre in this set is much more yellow than ochre, and I'm digging it. So getting into the background here, this is a classic way that I approach backgrounds, where I kind of just start wet on dry, and build the color blocking around the subject matter, and I leave a little bit of a white margin. Now, friends, this can feel very scary if you've never done it before. I do have a few more videos though, where I show you exactly how to paint a background like this, and I'm gonna link them below if you're interested. I found that this paint did so well in kind of high stress areas like this, where I was concerned about things drying too quickly. And now obviously paper has a huge place in that, and I'm using really good paper here. This is Fabriano, but paint also really has a lot to do with, are you going to see those weird hard edges that you weren't expecting? All that kind of stuff is surprisingly working out really well with these paints. And I guess I say surprising because, again, when you're dealing with more historical pigments, sometimes things can be a lot more predictable than more modern manufactured paints made from synthetic pigments that are a lot easier to control the output or the result. The output, oh my gosh, did I just say output? Anywho, you know what I mean. After that background, I let everything dry, and yes, definitely seeing that fading, but it's not bothering me. There's such a gorgeous kind of sumptuous quality to these pigments. I do feel like, let's compare to say a Gallo, the handmade watercolors out of Italy as well. Those also, she uses a lot of historical pigments in those sets. And again, without comparing apples to apples, pigment to pigment, I realize this is a vast generalization, but I feel like the Gallos don't fade as much once they're dry. I'm curious why. If anybody might know the answer to that, I'd love to hear about it in comments. And I'd also love if you'd give this video a boop, because you know the drill. Continuing on here with a second layer in those petals. I don't want to go super realistic. There's nothing realistic about this sketch, but I do want to add some depth and some character to these petals. And here's the thing, back to one of my swatching tips. Swatching alone is going to tell you, it's going to give you kind of a one-dimensional look at what your paints can do. But actually painting with them and having this painting not have the intentions of being a masterpiece or being something that you would necessarily even show to anyone, but just having it be a space for you to really explore a few things. So what am I exploring here by adding this heavy second layer? So I am wanting to see what these paints are going to do at mass tone, at full coverage. I'm seeing how quickly things dry when I apply a thicker layer of these paints. I am seeing how wet on wet is working when I've got a lot of paint on the page. So I'm just getting to understand a lot more about my paints. The other thing that I love understanding better by painting very soon after I swatch is playing around with the different personalities that a palette of colors may have. What's going on with the opacity? Are most of the paints super sheer? And do I have to build up color in a different way? Or do I have some opaque colors in here that I can really play around with? So for example, that Naples yellow reddish, super opaque. And I'm not sure that I fully would have understood that if I had just swatched and not painted as well. Now, I'm off to swatch a few more of my newest palettes, but I'm going to do it in a different way, and this video here is going to show you how. Happy painting!